Yes, I do.
You remember those sleepovers where you would randomly pick a movie and some of them would turn out to be absolute gems? Well, Hollow Man was one such film for me. Born in the late 2000s of the Gen Z era, the Kevin Bacon masterpiece wasn't something I grew up with. Thankfully, the movie found me, and ever since, its skin-crawling horror has stayed with me for years now. And Sebastian Caine, man, he's such a conceited genius that Tony Stark would be insecure to go up against him. However, Sebastian's narcissism and overconfidence are what brought about his downfall and turned him into the predatory Hollow Man. That said, he wasn't just the result of an experiment gone awry. A lot of Hollow Man's nature was a reflection of what Sebastian Caine inherently was, and to understand that, it's important to understand who this prodigy of a man really was. Who was Sebastian Caine? Sebastian Caine was a respected and brilliant scientist in his field, who achieved the title of a doctor and became the main antagonist of this 2000 sci-fi thriller. However, Caine's prowess came with an intolerable amount of vanity and ego. Considered to be one of the best, Sebastian was assigned the job of creating and testing a serum by the Pentagon. The elixir in question would allow a living being to become invisible, and reverted back to visibility with the goal of eventually using the technology in the US military. No doubt, Caine marveled at formulating this potion, and in the initial trials on animal subjects, it was successful too. However, Caine was a man who had an overwhelming lust for power and fame. Not just that, somewhere deep down, he harbored defiant tendencies and barely respected anyone. So much so that violating a woman's consent and harassing her was all fun and games for him. Basically, he was what we call a douchebag. And no amount of scientific jargon he threw away in style, or the mathematical calculations he excelled at, can convince me otherwise. What was Sebastian Caine's psychological profile? Sebastian Caine was astonishingly condescending and self-righteous, continually demeaning and irritating his coworkers, and thriving on the feeling of superiority. Throughout the early chapters of the film, Sebastian has shown his disregard for his team members' opinions in a questionably smug manner, and bombarded them with his pompous lectures. Caine was so damn self-centered that he nonchalantly cracked sexual jokes against the clear disapproval and disgust of the concerned women. In short, Sebastian was an infinitely arrogant person who even claimed his omnipotence in jest. He personified what God complex means. Oh, let's not forget that the bastard even had voyeuristic inclinations, who would often take pleasure from observing a girl undressing through his window. Sebastian was portrayed as a heartless and cruel man, who didn't give a rat's ass about the poor animal being used as specimens and engaged in direct conflict with the veterinarian Sarah Kennedy. He scheduled a newly visible gorilla for dissection, which exasperated Sarah. Yet Sebastian just coldly retorted that he wasn't raising a zoo and couldn't care less if the gorilla survived or perished. He just went ahead with the testing and injected the primate with the serum, without running it through preliminary tests, simply because it saved time. That's Sebastian Caine for you, a selfish, egomaniacal brainiac. What was Caine's physical transformation? This man could have simply let the Pentagon know that the serum has received positive feedback as far as animals were test subjects, but he chose to deceive them all, including his mentor, Dr. Howard Kramer, and said that the reversion process was not yet successful. It was all a part of his mega plan to get an extension period, and use the elixir on himself. Yeah, you heard that right. Caine wanted to become the greatest man ever, who invented a concoction that could grant visibility and invisibility on demand. Though Linda McKay, his ex-girlfriend, and Matt Kensington, the molecular biologist, resisted his idea, they eventually had to give in to Caine's infallible confidence. The rest of the group members were a little suspicious of the sudden decision to use the serum on a human being, but Linda reluctantly convinced them and kept their project leader's recklessness a secret for the time being. Sebastian put himself through the painful transformation process to turn invisible, and even passed out from the shock initially, but he clenched his teeth and went ahead through the agony till the moment he realized that his eyelids had become translucent, and he was on the brink of becoming the most glorious and intelligent man in history. How did Caine perceive the world while invisible? For the first 3 days, Caine was suggested to rest before the team tried reverting his invisibility, and the man was more than elated to evade vision. He soon realized the perks that came with this intangibility and started abusing his power. Sebastian started spying on his group members or playing silly pranks on them. But that didn't satisfy his inherent wildness. Figuring he could do anything and get away with it, Sebastian actually started believing himself to be some otherworldly force and perceived everyone and everything below him. He didn't hesitate twice to molest Sarah in her sleep, either as an act of vengeance for her snarky behavior or simply because he was a pervert. However, he got bored pretty quickly and wanted to regain his visible form to affirm his victory and claim his much-awaited trophy, which was nothing other than public adoration and prestige. However, when the team began the restoration process, it failed, and Caine was stuck with the imperceptible body while everyone else struggled to find an alternative that could bring him back to normalcy. Thinking Caine might be distressed, which he was at first, they provided him with a latex mask and gloves to help him interact. The makeshift face covering gave Sebastian the infamous disturbing look, and in no time, the man started enjoying and boundlessly exploiting his powers. In reality, the transformation was not just physical. It degraded Caine's already sadistic mind and pushed him down a dark slope of vindictiveness. What unique abilities does Caine possess as the Hollow Man? See, being the Hollow Man basically bestowed one special ability on Caine: to be a sick human being and sexual assaulter who used his shapelessness as the primary weapon. With the unparalleled stealth that Caine had, he attacked the unsuspecting girl in his neighborhood and violated her sexual dignity in the most heinous manner. Sebastian always tried to seduce his former girlfriend and seemed to be unnecessarily grabby with her. As the Hollow Man, he even exploited Linda's body and touched her inappropriately. Needless to say, both these acts were non-consensual, and Caine was just misusing the transparency to satisfy his misogynist pride, which was too fragile to handle rejection. Moreover, Sebastian also employed his powers of obscurity to be present in places without permission and eavesdrop on personal conversations. I'm sure you all remember the typical toxic ex Caine proved himself to be, after sneakily watching Linda and Matt together and breaking a window pane in a fit of rage. None of Caine's newfound abilities were helpful or good in nature. Rather, it brought out his malicious side and turned him into a living, immaterial monster. Also, no matter how powerful Caine thought his invisibility was, the truth is, women can always sniff out ghouls like him, because with or without a body, they know what it means to be watched, objectified, and targeted. What are the limitations of Caine's abilities? Thankfully, the prick was not completely invulnerable without a structure. He could be spotted using thermal goggles and was restricted by solid objects. No matter how much he believed himself to be nearly divine, in reality, he was just another mortal who happened to have a brain that worked faster. Caine would also leave sly traces for people to pick up if he was there. For instance, when he escaped Linda's room, the subtle movement of the curtain and a fleeting breeze gave the woman an idea about Caine's presence. More importantly, Sebastian could not defy biology. He retained his body mass and molecular density like any other human being, and could be weakened once his form was visible by making him wet, covering him in blood, or surrounding him in steam. In fact, if not for these weaknesses, Linda and Matt couldn't have made it out alive when the nutjob went on a murdering spree. How does Caine's relationship with the others change post-transformation? Caine never really had an amicable relationship with anyone, and after becoming the Hollow Man, the bonds between him and the group members only grew more bitter. He started throwing tantrums and ridiculing all, particularly Matt, when their attempts at the reversion process failed. He grew more and more commanding and started accentuating the power dynamics, where Caine, as the head of the project, defied and insulted everyone at the first chance. Sarah grew suspicious of him as a possible sexual predator and tried her best to avoid him. Linda and Matt, too, were not sure about Caine anymore. They began realizing they can't actually go to any length to feed his ego. People started hating him even more and realized that Sebastian wasn't just rude or self-absorbed. He was a dangerous, homicidal person. Caine began killing the very people that were supposed to be his work family, and right before they died, they had nothing but shock, anger, and disgust for this demon of a scientist. What ethical dilemmas arise from Caine's experiment? Sebastian Caine's transformation raised a very important question about the morals and ethics of scientific practices. Even before his metamorphosis, Caine's inhuman treatment of the animal subjects was extremely concerning, and threw light on what apparently happens to them in a laboratory. Though I believe that director Paul Verhoeven wasn't trying to portray scientific and technological advancements in a negative light, he sure did bring the possible misuse of such upgrades to public eyes. Caine became living proof of what could happen when experimental research overtakes one's mind and body. The unchecked power that comes with being able to treat humanity as a mere statistical project can give rise to beasts like Hollow Man. The film was a brilliant commentary on how one should treat scientific innovation, and that it should never be given more priority than living beings themselves. Drowned in aspirations and greed for glory, one tends to overlook the value of individual lives and societal norms, and often imposes rationality as the primary driving force of mankind. However, the truth is, no matter the number of objective discoveries, the very essence of survival lies in compassion, honesty, and love. How does Caine's anatomy contribute to the horror of the film? Sebastian Caine was no spectral figure or devil from the netherworld. He was a human like any of us, yet he managed to instill a sense of fear and kept audiences at the edge of their seats. From the moment his anatomy changed, Caine gave out a lingering sense of horror. He began weaponizing the absence of a material body to haunt people, and blurred the line between reality and the world of phantoms. His untraceability constantly reminded us that monsters are not always supernatural. Some are born from within human flesh and mind. The challenge to capture something without being able to have a clear vision of it made Caine akin to a spirit. However, Caine's ghostly nature transcended beyond his anatomy, for it was rooted in his psyche. The horror in the movie was thus twofold in nature, one that rose from Sebastian's imperceptible physical form, and the ability to act without restraint. Secondly, the fright of how destructive a corrupt person can be. To state simply, Caine's terror is still alive in every such person who's been stripped of their virtues in the face of uncontrollable power. Marvelous verdict. Okay guys, here we are. Analyzing the Hollow Man's anatomy was definitely eerie. I mean, you're dealing with a man who has an extraordinary mind, which is unfortunately twisted and filled with nastiness. Sebastian Caine's dichotomy and the associated feeling that this character is not something completely unreal is what makes Hollow Man scary as hell. Moreover, his look in the latter parts of the movie and the creepy eye sockets in the mask consolidated his place in the history of horror. I can't fathom what a mastermind Verhoeven must have been to use Caine's anatomy as a tool to convey a vibe of impending doom without actually having as much as a real body to put on the screen. Let us know your thoughts on Sebastian Caine and his rise as the ever spooky Hollow Man. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!